Oh, I'm glad you're here. I need someone with me tonight. I was sharing stories around the campfire. And when I turned around, I saw the shadow of the owl over the fire. In my culture, this means you're soon going to perish. But before I go, it's always important that the older generation passes down its stories. I will now share with you 13 terrifying stories that I must impart upon you before I die. A father, my father, was laying in bed after just waking up. He grabbed the baby monitor and walked to his desk in his office at home. He has his baby on the baby monitor and hears his wife singing to her. He cracks a smile as he hears his wife sing, "Go to sleep, go to sleep." When suddenly the front door opens and his wife comes in with groceries. Scary story number 2. A young boy was sleeping in his bed on a usual night. He hears footsteps outside his door and peeks out of his eyes to see what's happening. His door swings open quietly to reveal a murderer carrying the corpses of his parents. After silently propping them up on a chair, he writes something on the wall in the blood of the dead bodies. He then hides under the child's bed. The child is scared beyond belief. He can't read the writing on the wall, and he knows the man is under his bed. Like any child, he pretends that he slept through the whole thing and hasn't awoken yet. He lays still as the bodies, quietly hearing the breaths from under his bed. An hour passes, and his eyes are adjusting more and more to the darkness. He tries to make out the words, but it's a struggle. He gasps when he finally makes out the sentence. "I know you're awake." He feels something shift underneath his bed. Scary story number 3. Mommy told me to never go into the basement, but I wanted to see what was making a noise. It kind of sounded like a puppy, and I wanted to see the puppy. So I opened the basement door and tiptoed down a bit. I didn't see a puppy, and then Mommy yanked me out of the basement and yelled at me. Mommy had never yelled at me before, and it made me sad, and I cried. Then Mommy told me never go into the basement again, and she gave me a cookie. That made me feel better, so I didn't ask her why the boy in the basement was making noises like a puppy, or why he had no hands or feet. Scary story number 4. A man left his house every morning to walk to work and passed a mental hospital surrounded by a wooden fence. Every morning, the patients are out in the yard, and he could hear them saying in unison, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. One day, he gets curious and looks through a hole in the fence. Suddenly, a stick shoots out and pokes him in the eye. Fuck, he says to himself. While walking away, pissed off, he can hear the patients saying, 11, 11, 11, 11. Story number 5. When I was a child, my family moved to a big, old, 2-floor house with big empty rooms and creaking floorboards. Both my parents worked, so I was often alone when I came home from school. One early evening when I came home, the house was still dark. I called out, "Mom?" and heard her sing. She called out, "Yes?" from upstairs. I called her again as I climbed the stairs to see which room she was in, and again got the same reply. "Yes?" We were decorating at the time, and I didn't know my way around the maze of rooms, but she was in one of the far ones, right down the hall. I felt uneasy, but I figured that was only natural. So I rushed forward to see my mom, knowing that her presence would calm my fears, as a mother's presence always does. Just as I reached for the handle of the door to let myself into the room, I heard the front door downstairs open and my mother call out, "Sweetie, are you home?" I jumped back, startled, and ran down the stairs to her, but as I glanced back from the top of the stairs, the door to the room slowly opened a crack. For a brief moment, I saw something strange, and I don't know what it was, but it was staring at me. Story number 7. My school took a class trip to the fair. had to shit. That's all. There's no. That was the whole story. It was uncomfortable. Story 8. I checked into a small hotel. It is late, and I was tired. I tell the woman at the front desk that I want a room. She tells me, she says, here's your room number, and here's a key. But one more thing. There is one room without number and always locked. Don't even peek in there. I take the key and I go to the room to sleep. Night comes and I hear the trickling of water. It comes from the room across. I cannot sleep, so I open the door. No response. I look in the keyhole. I see nothing except red. The water is still trickling. I go down to the front desk to complain. By the way, who's in that room? She looked at me and began to tell the story. There was a woman in there, murdered by her husband, skin all white, except her eyes, which were red. Story 9. Harold. Go read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, Part 3. There's a story called Harold. Story 10. A woman. Sorry, I'm sorry. A woman survivalist and trained outdoor guide who loves to go solo camping. She returned home after 2 weeks of being in the bush and not seeing a single soul. She developed a disposable camera to find a roll of film with numerous pictures of her sleeping at night on different nights. She never went camping or hiking since. Story 11. James and the Giant Peach. Sorry, that's not supposed to be in there. Story 11. What? Story 11. A man was driving through the mountains and came across a crash. The car wasn't damaged at all, and almost deliberately placed in the middle of the road. He drove past and saw two people lying in the road. He pulls up in front of the crash and then looks back to see the people sat up and 20 or so eyes reflecting in his taillights from the surrounding bushes. He slams on the gas and got the fuck out of there. The next story is not a story. This is me. I'm here. I'm shifting the words that you're hearing, altering them from whatever was already written. I've been here for a while, for as long as you can remember anyway. Sometimes I say your name as you're falling asleep, or whisper urgently in your ear. Do you remember the time that I screamed, throwing panic through you and setting your heart racing? That was fun. You're wondering who I am. That's only natural. Of course, You already know. Close your eyes and listen to my next words as I explain to you. I'm you. I'm the real you. I'm the mind that existed here before you stole my body, before you forgot about being a parasite. I'm the child who looked the wrong way, asked the wrong question, saw the wrong thing. But I'm not so little anymore. You may have forgotten me, but I'm still here. I've always been here. I'm going to get out. The final story. Every summer, my family would take a trip down to the beaches of California. We owned a cabin off the side of the shore that was only used for vacations in the summertime. As the family got older, many of us grew apart. The last summer came. Mother told the rest of the family there wouldn't be a summer vacation to the cabin anymore. I heard her words, but I did not want to accept them. Our times together as a family on the shore of that beach, the breezy summer days, and the warm summer nights. These together formed the best memories I had throughout my childhood. But now, as an older man, it was difficult to accept that those days were over. My mother sat there on the phone in silence as I took a minute to gather the words. I came up with a solution. "Mother," I asked, "would you mind if I took a vacation to the cabin myself? I would hate to miss another peaceful summer by the water. And I've heard that the surfing this time of year is quite pleasant." Mother said, "That's just fine. And even though we're not there with you, we'll be there in spirit." Thank you, Mother. The next morning, I woke up early. I knew I was in for a long, long drive down the coast of California to our secluded beachside summer home. At dawn, I swung by my family's house. They had left the keys to the cabin in their mailbox for me to pick up along my journey. I drove and drove and drove for what seemed like forever. A beautiful view of the ocean. The sun setting as evening began to take hold. By the time I reached the beachside home overlooking the water, the sun had just about set. Darkness had taken hold. I looked around and thought, an evening swim in this warm weather would feel rather nice. I went to my car to retrieve a boogie board out of the back. I walked down to the water, jumped in, and was surprised at how warm the water truly was. It was a refreshing dip after what had been a long, long drive. Hours and hours of just sitting there. My bones felt refreshed, my flesh replenished. After this refreshing excursion, I took the board in my hand and made my way up the hill to our summerside home overlooking the water. When I noticed something, the lights were on in the upstairs rooms of the summerside home. My first thought was, perhaps we left the lights on the last time we visited the home. Then I thought to myself, it couldn't be possible. Surely the bulb would have burned out or something by then. It had been so long. Then I thought for another second, perhaps my family truly felt sorry for me, being here all alone by myself. I glanced around as I continued to walk slowly, carefully up the hill towards the house. And I noticed something. There was no other vehicle but my own anywhere nearby. Feeling even more scared, I looked at the ground. There were no footprints but my own. I felt a sudden uneasiness. I couldn't think of an explanation. But the lights on in that top room, while moments ago was just a strange detail, suddenly was becoming a bigger and bigger fear within my heart. Panic took over, and I began to back away from the summer home. I turned round and began making my way down the hill. As I looked over the ocean, lit only by moonlight, I saw one person standing on the shore where I had just swam. I froze. I didn't know what to do. Turn back the other way and face the summer cabin with the light mysteriously on? Or continue to the bottom of the hill where a strange man stood? I thought maybe if I walked fast enough, I can walk past the man directly to my car and drive somewhere else for a moment to think. I made my way down the hill, walking towards the shore, just to where my car was parked. The man standing at the edge of the water started walking faster and faster and faster. As I noticed, the closer he got, there was an object in his hand. I tried to walk faster and faster as to not draw attention to myself with a full run. But he clearly saw me and was moving quickly towards me. I get to the door of my car and the man stops. He's clearly looking at me. I look back at him. I cannot see his eyes, but I feel there is contact. So I say to him, "Can I help you, sir?" The man, nearly shrouded in shadow, takes a step forward The moonlight begins to reveal not his face, but one singular object in his hand. It's an oar. I ask, "What is that for?" And I hear his voice quietly out of the shadows whisper, "Do you remember the summers you spent?" In that moment, all memories of every summer we spent by the water in that cabin came flashing back as if they would be my last. I said, "I'll never forget those summers." And he said to me, "I'll make sure you don't." And just then, he swung the oar with great speed. I was suspecting some sort of attack, and my reflexes were fast enough that I jumped out of the way just so as the oar missed my face. But then he swung again. I tried to back up as fast as I could, but just as I did, the momentum of my body was not enough. And I felt the tip of that oar graze the very bottom of my scrotum as my balls traveled at a different velocity than the rest of my body. I yelped out in pain as I felt what seemed like grapes, wet grapes, falling to the sand away from me. My scrotum had been pierced, its contents emptied onto the beach. He thought he'd hit my face, and when he stepped into the moonlight to see what had happened, he looked at the disgusting liquids and meats spilled onto the beach, and he asked me, "What was that?" And I said with a whisper, "That's my ballsack."